You finally buy the dip. And it dips even further. As the crypto markets are in absolute free fall, Bitcoin is on the move. XRP is on the move. At the same time, the Fear and Greed Index sets a new yearly low at 11. That's right, 11, resting in extreme fear. I've been reading posts on X and in the comment sections on many of the channels I like to watch on YouTube, and people are abandoning ship like never before. People who even just a month ago were praising the crypto market, saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. We're all going to be millionaires by this time next month, are now pulling the ripcord, selling their entire positions, calling crypto, quote, the biggest scam in history, unquote, which really just goes to show you the mentality of the average retail investor who loves to buy green candles because it feels good. He loves the euphoria. But when the true opportunity comes, the red candles, retail completely turns against the market, like Cujo turning against his master, frothing at the mouth, eager for revenge, looking for someone to lash out against, never realizing that it is not the bull markets that make millionaires, but it is in fact the bear markets. For those people who buy at the low to eventually sell at the highs later. One thing about the markets that will never change is retail mentality. But for those of us who are considered to be hardened investors at this point, I bought some crypto today. Only 6 months later,
welcome to the human race.
Get up! You escape from the principality!
and as always, this is not financial advice and is nothing less than the rantings and ravings of a man who not only claims to have seen a UFO, but believes that Bigfoot is in fact real. Taking a look at the daily, we can see that there's very few cryptos that are even in the green, with 2Z up 25.2%, WFI up 7.8%, Rain up 10.7%, and Aster up 6.6%. Even the weekly has taken quite a hit, with STRK still up 26% on the week, Rain up 10.2% on the week, Aster up 12.8% on the week. And jumping over to the monthly, we can see that Zcash is still on top at plus 142% for the month, with STRK in number 2 at 82.2%, and just a handful of others that are doing well, swimming in a complete sea of red. Hopping over to the yearly, we can see that AB has the crown, up 13,780% on the year, with Zcash in the number 2 spot at up 1,321%. Hype in the number 3 spot at plus 410%. We also have a couple of my picks, including XRP, Telcoin, and XMR, still in the green. Do me a favor and hit that like button before we get started. I would really appreciate it. Jumping over and taking a look at the weekly Bitcoin chart, you can see that Bitcoin has absolutely been getting hammered into the ground. Taking a look at this weekly chart, we can see that the current candle for this week has come down and touched the top of this order block. For quite some time, it seemed like it was going to be impossible for price to come down from this area up here to fill this CME gap. And as you can see now, price has not only gone through the CME gap, but has also taken out this bullish fair value gap just below it, and is now resting between that gap and this order block on the daily. It looks like that we could be seeing some kind of a relief rally, dead cat bounce, if you will, as this appears to me to be an ABC correction, of which at some point we should move into this B leg here. Now, whether or not it will ground out at this area, perhaps even making it up to this green bullish fair value gap, remains to be seen. But one thing for sure is if this is the case, the leg C is likely going to be even more painful than what we have seen thus far. We can also get additional confirmations that this may in fact be what we are going to see by taking a look at Michael Saylor's little baby MSTR, which is absolutely collapsing. You can see that the price of MSTR was trading within this well-defined channel for quite some time, going all the way back to May of 2022. Not one single time since that time has the price broken outside of this channel until right here. During the week of October 27th, 2025, price broke below and is currently dropping even lower. There are a number of gaps and volume imbalances highlighted here in the yellow on this particular chart, which are very likely to continue being filled. As you can see, this one right here was just filled, which makes it very likely that we could see even more of these fill. But the bad thing is that these lower volume imbalances are resting at incredibly lower prices, with this one sitting at 41.66 on center, this one here at 35.27 on center, and this one here resting at $30.05. If we zoom into the chart and we take a look at these fib retracement levels right here, going off of this high and this previous low, we can see that they are resting right in the same area of these volume imbalances. If we take a wider approach, going off of these fibs, going off of that same high and that same low, the 1.618 through the 1.786 all rest right in this cluster of volume imbalances. Could that be a coincidence? I seriously doubt it. But one thing is for sure when looking at the MSTR charts, and something I've been talking about recently, it sure seems like the powers that be are hell-bent on going after Michael Saylor. And if you know anything about the Bitcoin Reserve executive order that was released by President Donald Trump, MAGA's savior, there is a very good chance that Bitcoin confiscation is coming to America. And as it is currently written, they cannot buy Bitcoin because it has to be acquired at zero cost to the taxpayers, which means confiscation. Now, with what we have seen in the past, especially thinking back on the FTX debacle that occurred, if something was to happen to MicroStrategy going belly up because of Michael Saylor's absolute obsession with completely over-leveraging the strategy to the hilt in order to continue buying Bitcoin, if this works against him and strategy goes down in flames, I guarantee you this will be labeled as an emergency, which will then force the government to step in and seize all of the Bitcoin that Strategy has acquired, adding it to their digital asset reserves, likely for the next couple of years until this whole thing is figured out. And if we know one thing about the government, it's that they take their sweet time at anything they do. But they've made it clear that the only way that they intend on acquiring any Bitcoin for the reserve is through seizure, which is why I hold 0 Bitcoin and why I am reducing my current cash position. Also, by jumping over and looking at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map, this is the 1 month chart, we can see that the vast majority of the liquidity is resting above current price, with the thickest band of liquidity resting right here and at about that 112,000 range. Current liquidity has absolutely been sucked dry out of the market, as you can see, with price pushing down to the last nitty little gritties down here, the last tiny little grains of liquidity that are left, with the big dogs likely getting very desperate. Once we do start to see a turnaround, they are going to start chomping on this liquidity like Pac-Man hopped up on cannabis, which could potentially move that ABC correction with the B leg coming up into this territory. And if that's the case and we do have a C leg to the downside and you're a holder of Bitcoin, you might want to think very hard if we do return back to this level about what your next move is going to be. If you would like to support this channel, the easiest way to do it is by joining my Patreon. There's 3 different levels for paid memberships, but you can also join for free if that better suits you. Or even if you're just looking to swap your cryptos for 0 fees, use my link and sign up for Bitunix. It's the only place that I trade crypto. It's where I swap all of my crypto, and doing so helps the channel. So check it out. You'll be glad that you did. Now, jumping over and taking a look at the weekly XRP chart. In my last video, I talked about these channels here as well as this bullish hidden divergence, which is now correlating with this point here better than this previous point here, since price has actually come down and swept this previous low right there. But this does give us a longer-term perspective when looking at this overall bullish divergence, which we can see the blue line is now way below the horizontal white line, which is generally the area that we will see a reversal. If we do look at the last time that this occurred right here before price pushed out of the bottom of this channel, we can see that it formed this candle right here. And when it did dip below this channel, it pushed down to the 1.702. Nearly perfectly setting this bottom trend line of the broadening, expanding wedge that we are currently trading in. By looking at the current channel that we're seeing, the liquidation candle on 1010 pushed down perfectly to the 1.702. The same thing that we saw right here. But we are seeing some differences with the current candle that's pushing through the bottom of the lower trend line. Thus far, it has also come down into the area of the 0.702 fib retracement, which is based off of this high here, coming off of the flash crash low. So I've made some adjustments to this because in the previous video, I was coming off of this low instead. But I think this is now a better fit with the current price action we're seeing. But when we look at the way this candle is shaping, it looks very similar to the candle we saw right here, pointed out by the green arrow. So does this mean that we could potentially see something similar, as they have both pushed down into this bullish fair value gap right here from the monthly chart that I've been talking about in my recent videos? Which, even though price has wicked through on the weekly chart, has actually held price up above it on the monthly chart, with the exception of the monthly candle that we are currently in, which I talked about in my most recent video. And it is now breaking towards that lower range of this fair value gap, which could be a bearish sign. And another thing that we also need to be cognizant of on the weekly chart is the fact that it is not uncommon for price to revisit and retest off of the 200-day moving average. Looking at the current chart here, where we can see the bottom was just set here in the last 24 hours, currently the 200-day moving average is resting right here on the weekly chart down at about $1.35, which is certainly not out of the realm of possibility. If price did come down to this area, retesting off of this lower trend line before breaking up, that would completely negate this bullish hidden divergence, but could potentially come down to the 1.786, bouncing off of this lower trend line, retesting off the 200-day moving average, and sweeping the low of the flash crash candle wick. So there are multiple possibilities. We could see a reversal in this area, perhaps coming off of the 786. We could see price come through this, negating the bullish hidden divergence, bouncing off the lower trend line, then bouncing to the upside. But if we look at the same area here that is very similar with this candle and this candle, after seeing a big push to the downside touching the lower trend line of the broadening wedge, that's when we started to see the recovery. Price came back down, retested this white line that you can see right here, which I outlined in previous videos, called the reverse dragon pattern, if you remember, hitting the exact point that I outlined well in advance. Once touching this area, we then saw the biggest part of the move. And with the CCI getting down in that area, we could start to see this blue line turn upward, which if you look back to this point here, we want to see it cross that yellow line before we see the big move to the upside. And being the weekly chart, there could be quite a few weeks here before anything like that occurs. So the market definitely has plenty of time left if it wants to pick us up and suplex us in front of the world. But it's always better to be aware of all of the possibilities. And whatever happens, you know I'll be watching like a hawk, and I have no plans of selling my XRP. In fact, I'm still accumulating Telcoin, ZBCN, and XDC as we speak, reducing my cash position to my previous goal of 3%, which very well could turn into 2%. But no matter how it turns out, don't let the market turn you upside down. If you want to capture the king, you're going to have to sacrifice a few pawns along the way. So thank you so much, and have a great day.